Hey everyone, my name's Darren, I'm an alcoholic. And welcome to the 59th Annual Australian National Convention. Yay! We will have the official opening later tonight at 7 p.m, so please stick around for that. Given we had the room booked for the day, we thought why not run a step series? So we will be running a step series today, right through until step 8 and 9 this afternoon. But it's really exciting. The committee, I don't know how many of them are in the room here tonight, this morning. There's 20 of us who've worked tirelessly for 18 months to bring this together for you all. So thank you to them. I'm led to believe that a miracle took place. There was not one argument. I'm not joking. There wasn't one argument. I think it is a miracle. I think it's the first one. It was close a few times though. Someone did need to throw a bucket of water at one point, but no actual arguments broke out. So we really do hope that you enjoy the program that the committee have pulled together for you this afternoon. I'll come back after the meeting with some housekeeping notes, but for now, I'd just like to say welcome, and I'll hand you over to Matthew, who is a member of the 100,000 Head Miles Checkup Group, to open the meeting. Matthew.
Thank you, Darren. Welcome to the Steps 1 to 3 meeting of the 59th Australian National Convention, AA80. My name is Matthew C., and I'm an alcoholic. Here is the AA preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. We've selected 3 speakers who will share for 25 minutes each on each step. And first, we have Wendy G. from Curl Curl Sunday to share on step 1, please.
I'm Wendy and I'm an alcoholic. I'm a member of Curl Curl Sunday 4 p.m. group, and I've got a bit of a scratchy voice, but we'll see how we go. Hopefully the microphone works well. So step 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and our lives had become unmanageable. I found this step incredibly difficult to admit and accept. I certainly wasn't raised to be powerless, and I didn't think there was anything wrong with the way I was running my life either. I picked up a drink when I was 11, and I drank until I passed out, and I thought it was fantastic. I loved the way it made me feel, and I felt comfortable. Up until that point in time, I just knew there was something wrong with me. I just didn't know what it was. And I mean, childhood trauma is part of my story. And while I don't want to minimise that, it certainly didn't make me an alcoholic. But what it did is it certainly shaped the way I saw you and the rest of the world. I grew up in an emotional desert. I wouldn't have known an emotion if I tripped over it for most of my life, actually, until I got through the steps of recovery here. But there was lots of unspoken rules in my house. Never apologise, don't say sorry, it's a sign of weakness. If you're not first, you're last, no matter what looked good. And I really, really believed that my very self-worth was measured by achievements. And so I achieved a lot, and so did my siblings. We were actually a bunch of gross overachievers, but that's just the way it was. And my parents were actually good people, but they parented us with a lot of bad information and their own trauma. But as a young kid, nobody told me to lie as a little girl, but it was implied, and so I became a liar very young. Fantasy was my first addiction, and these things saved me, that they just saved me, and I think fantasy and lying goes hand in hand. And, as a little girl, they were kind of useful strategies. In fact, all of my defects were once useful strategies, but there's no longevity in it. I love drinking. I never ever tried to control my drinking. I just knew that I used to drink for as long as I could, and then I'd stay sober for as long as I could. But when the fear and the anxiety kicked in, it didn't last, because I'd pick up a drink. At 15 years old, I was far more comfortable drinking with men 4 times my age in the public bar than I ever was in the schoolyard. And so, despite being quite good at school, I dropped out. I just couldn't take the pressure anymore. And nobody questioned me in the public bar. Nobody said to me, shouldn't you be at school? Shouldn't be somewhere else? It's because I only ever drank with alcoholics of my type. And eventually I became the barmaid, and I thought, well, that's fantastic. I used to, people used to drink and put their empty glasses forward. I'd take it, fill it up, take the money, put it back, and nobody spoke. At a really young age, I thought, this is just great. This is the way I want to drink. I never wanted to go to your barbecue and have a glass of wine. That's not me. If I was at home, I would just sit on the lounge room floor, put on really sad music and drink until I passed out with the curtains drawn. I remember back then it was a record player, just putting the needle on the Simon & Garfunkel, "Hello Darkness, My Old Friend, Hello Darkness, My Old Friend," over and over again in complete fantasy. And, I just never once saw that there was anything wrong with this. The insane had definitely become the sane. But I had one saving grace. I was really good at sport. And thankfully for me, it took up a lot of time. And I was, and it was good. I ended up in a national sporting team. And I used to say I was locked up in the Institute of Sport in Canberra, but nobody else in the team would say that. They'd say they were down there for training. But all I knew was I just did not know the power that alcohol had over me. I knew that something was very wrong. The more days that went along where I didn't have a drink, I became incredibly restless, irritable and discontent. The fear, the worry, the anxiety kicked in, and so did that imposter syndrome. Like, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be in this team. You're not good enough to be in this team. What are you doing? And of course, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I lost my place. My sponsor used to say, when you tell people you're in a national sporting team, don't forget to tell them you got kicked straight back out. And I did, but not for being drunk. I got kicked out for being stark raving sober. Somebody said to me back then, you're an enigma. 1 minute you're one of the best goal shooters in Australia, and the next minute you can't seem to catch and throw. And I didn't know why. Not once through all that was happening did I ever think it was the alcohol. I was a chronic drunk driver. If I was out drinking, I was always driving. I remember vividly my first major car accident. I was driving home, talking to myself, going, you are a phenomenal driver. You are the best. You're the best. And then I drove my car into the bedroom of a house. And the next morning, my mother said to me, what happened? And I said, oh, it's the brakes. And she said, okay, great, thanks. Just needed a plausible excuse. But I was sitting there going, no, really, Wendy, what happened? And then I realised, what was I thinking driving that way home? I should never have driven that way home. There was only 2 ways to get to my place. Either I turn left or I go straight ahead. I thought I'll never turn left again. So, not long after that, I was driving straight ahead because I'm not going left, and I drove my next car into a telegraph pole, and the car was split in two down the middle. And, I broke my ribs, I'm coughing up blood. And again, I'm sitting on my parents' porch going, what happened? What what the hell's going on here? And I realised the problem was Australia, and I had to leave. I mean, it's funny, but it's true. I thought, what am I doing here? I shouldn't be in this country. So I went to Los Angeles. And of course I kept drinking and doing exactly the same stuff there. But over there, I met a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, you know, I'm codependent and I needed a place to stay, so I moved in with him. And anyway, one day he said, oh, it's my second AA birthday. Now, I am emotionless. I've got to fake everything. And I went, oh, that's great, darling, you know. And he goes, no, I'm going off to the meeting. And so off he went. And he came home and insisted on speaking to me about the meeting. And he's going, oh, it was great. I got to tell my story and I got a cake and, you know, relive the chaos and the DUIs and the car accidents. And I said, oh, so what? Everyone has car accidents. And he goes, no, they don't. And I said, yeah, they do. And he said, did you drink and drive? I said, of course. And I'm telling him about my car accidents. I mean, I had an enormous capacity for alcohol then. You couldn't tell if I had 2 or 22. And, you know, for the longest time he would tell everybody, I never knew she was drunk. You know, I never appeared drunk. But anyway, he ended up taking me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was on the 15th of August, 1987. And I haven't had a drink since then. Yeah, I mean, it truly is a miracle for somebody who was drinking every day. I did not come in here with the third tradition. I had no desire to stop drinking, didn't want to be here. I used to go to AA meetings, you know, just in paralysing fear and shame. I'd bail up old timers, talking to them, saying how I'm not really an alcoholic. And maybe if I'd tried to have 2 drinks, I could have done it, but I never tried. And you know, and my sponsor said, did you want 2 drinks? I said, no, I never want 2 drinks. I just want to drink till I pass out. But, you know, the mind of the alcoholic has a great way of rewriting history. Oh, it wasn't that bad. It's all right. You could have had 2 drinks. I mean, I could never deny the unmanageability of my active alcoholism. The car accidents, the dropping out of high school, the losing my sporting career, the loss of friends and ambition. I was quite ambitious. I stayed away from my family. I couldn't face them anymore. You know, people used to say, oh, how's Wendy doing? Because at one time, you know, I was kicking a lot of goals. But in the end, I mean, really, you're not doing much if all ever anybody has to say about you is your potential. You know, I mean, I was just doing nothing. So I stayed away. But drunkalogs never impressed me in meetings. I just thought, oh, so what? But I really identified with the internal unmanageability, the worry, the fear, the anxiety, the catastrophic thinking, the loneliness. But I would never say I was lonely. I used to say I like to isolate because I thought that was edgy and cool. I didn't want to be a loser and say I was lonely. I mean, just the madness in my head. And I literally didn't know how to live sober. So, and I had it, you know, I'm just waiting for anybody. I just wanted somebody with credibility in AA, some old timer to say to me, you should go out and have another go. You know, if you're not sure, have another. And nobody ever did. I'm very grateful for that. So grateful for that. But I needed some tools immediately when I got here. Immediately when I got here, I needed tools to live. My first addiction was fantasy. I'm a compulsive liar, and that was making my life increasingly unmanageable. That didn't stop when I came into AA. So my sponsor said to me, listen, before you speak, ask yourself, is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? And for the longest time, I couldn't get past the first one because nothing I ever said was true. And then it was just amazing how much I said was completely unnecessary as well. But it was a good tool to have. And with the fantasy, you know, I had to learn to keep my head where my feet are. And in early sobriety, I couldn't even turn the radio on in the car because within 30 seconds of a song playing, I'd be a rock star somewhere in the world, you know, and I'd lose the plot again. But probably most importantly, I had to learn what the voice of alcoholism sounded like. You know, it was usually negative, dark, catastrophic, but it always seeks to separate me. It was the voice who said, you know, you're not an alcoholic. You don't need to go to that meeting. You went yesterday. And if I was at the meeting, you know, it'd be saying, don't stay after the meeting. That's just going to be really awkward and weird. Run immediately. And so it was a good, you know, when I speak to my sponsor about this, you need to recognise this voice. It is not true. It's not true. And, you know, so I needed to act better, and my thinking changed. So eventually I could calm down. You know, they call it the clinic of calm, and it certainly became that for me. I'm very, very grateful for the old timers that were there when I came in. You know, I'm looking at my friend Dick here and Julie, and really I'm so grateful for the time that old timers spent with me. They're very wise. You know, I'd often turn up to meetings completely mad, and they never spoke to me before the meeting. They'd speak afterwards when I was a little bit, you know, more together. They'd just say, oh, come in, it's all right. My sponsor used to call me Wendy Girl. I'm like, oh, come on, Wendy Girl, just come in and sit down. But I could just take a breath, you know. And every time I said, I'm Wendy, I'm an alcoholic, you know, my soul loves to hear what it already knows. I knew, my body, my very being knew that I was an alcoholic, but it took me a long time to admit and accept that, even though, thank God, I didn't pick up a drink. So, you know, the years tick by in AA. They tick by, and, you know, I'm getting that chip every year for a birthday. And the thing is that smug complacency can also kick in. You know, the ego rebuilds, and all of a sudden I'm replacing alcohol with busyness, way too busy. I had a part-time job, a full-time job, 2 young kids. I went back to school. I didn't finish high school, so I couldn't go to uni. I had to go to TAFE, then uni. I ended up studying for 13 years. It was really busy, and I couldn't just study. I have to come first in everything. That's the only thing I know. All I ever wanted to be was a chartered accountant. And people always go, what? That's what you want to be? That's all I ever wanted to be. And all these years later, I still love it. But anyway, so, and in AA, you know, somebody said to me once in AA, you don't worry, Wendy, you'll love AA. It's like a team sport. And I said, yeah, I'll join, but I'm going to be captain. And so, but in this time, I've got a bit of time up now, and I'm acting like I'm captain of AA. I looked the part. It never fooled my sponsor or my husband. But, you know, I'm sponsoring a ridiculous amount of people. I am speaking everywhere, thinking I'm just fantastic, and going to meetings with a critical mind. You know, if somebody was asked to share that I didn't deem worthy, I'd be thinking, oh God, here goes 10 minutes of my life, I'll never get back. You know, I'm not listening. I'm thinking, why wouldn't you call me? I'm here, you should call me. And then I wasn't listening. You know, you're sharing and I'm preparing my speech, often a rebuttal to what somebody said, but which, you know, shrouded as, you know, crosstalk basically. And at home, I'm just angry. I'm yelling at my husband and little children. I became very cynical and sarcastic. I'll tell you who sarcasm doesn't work on: small children. My son, my little boy, came to me. He said, "Oh, I'm going out to play." I said, "No, you're not going out to play. Go and clean your room up. It's a mess." So he goes in and goes, "Rightio." So I went in there, and I said, "Well, you're a genius. You've just shoved everything in the cupboard." And he goes, "I know." And I said, "And you've kicked all of these clothes under the bed. Fantastic, mate." And he goes, "I know." And he said, "Can I go play?" I said, "Yeah, just go." Anyway, and I heard my husband say, "Did Mum say you could go?" And he said, "Yeah, she said I'm a genius and fantastic and I should go play." And I just think of that, and I just think children are such a good leveller. They're such a good leveller. And, you know, but I had a huge emotional rock bottom at 12 years of sobriety. You know, the fact that I was powerless and unmanageable had faded into the background, and I had once again became the own power in my life. And it didn't matter what it looked like. I wasn't telling the truth of what was really going on. And whatever stays in the darkness will run my life. I'm forever grateful for sponsorship. My beautiful sponsor's here today. I heard people say in meetings, I can't lie, my sponsor's here. I would have no problem lying at any time, but I choose not to today. But I had to get honest. I had to go back to step one, go back to some very basic things. The Holts don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or in my case, serious. I was very serious, in that period of my life. Everything became a competition again, and I'm going to be number one. And it didn't matter who I flattened or how I went about it. Also, in that state when I'm in charge, my power is limited, spiritual power is unlimited, and my world becomes very small. So there's not much going on. I was so tense all the time. But why is it so important for me to recognise the Holts? Because in that state, I lose perspective and the ability to think straight. Being incredibly angry is not the greatest time to make a good decision. And I had to notice all of this. I had to really go back and see that this is a threefold disease. Mental, physical, spiritual. If I go off mentally and spiritually, I can get physically unwell. If I'm physically sick, I can go off mentally. My thinking changes, like somehow this is going to be endless. I'm always going to be sick. It's like if I'm happy, the world looks great, life is wonderful. But when I'm not, that cloak of darkness seems to come down, and it's like the endlessness kicks in. So, just to recognise these things, I never, during my drinking, I could not connect the dots. I never thought it was, the alcohol. I couldn't see the gross unmanageability in my life. But it took me to slow down. It took that emotional rock bottom. Like I said, I'm so grateful I didn't pick up a drink. And it's because I didn't lose my connection. I still had a sponsor. I was living, my husband was sober in AA, and I had key friends, and people were just really kind. That's the thing, we put ourselves in the middle of the healing community of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we get taken care of, but it does require telling the truth of what's going on, not building a persona or hiding behind, in my case, a really big ego. Life is much slower these days, and I'm very grateful for that, so grateful. But I've got a very big life, a wonderful life, thanks to AA, a really wonderful life. That man that took me to my first meeting in LA, we got married. We were together for 34 years. Kenny, and I know I look around here and there's lots of people who knew Kenny and who loved him, and he was the poster boy for Alcoholics Anonymous. He was always optimistic, absolutely loved it, and loved conventions. I used to call him and our best friend Michael the Joy Boys. And back in the early days, I was called the Prophet of Doom. And I was so down, I wasn't even offended. I wouldn't like it if I was called that today. But look, I have done a lot of things wrong in my time in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I've done some very key things right. I've never picked up a drink. I've always had a sponsor and a home group. And I've made some lifelong connections in AA, and connections are very important. We all need someone to, so we can pick up that phone and talk to. I've got two beautiful children. They're not children anymore, they're adults. My lovely daughter, Hannah, is here, and she's got 12 years of sobriety. Kenny passed away, I'm not sure if I just said that, I can't remember, on the 14th of August 2021. And I'm just so grateful for the life we had. You can have great hope if you knew that AA works. Kenny used to say he's never seen AA not work. And I can say the same thing. The only time it doesn't work is when I don't do it. You know, I had to really get that I have a spiritual malady, and only a spiritual solution is going to solve that. Lucky for me, I'm in a program that we have a 12 steps of, spiritual recovery. That's what I need. I used to seek power wherever I went, and now I just seek connection, especially with you. I want to thank the committee for asking me to speak. It's such a privilege, and thank you for all your hard work in getting AA80 off the ground. It's just going to be a great weekend. Thanks.
Thank you, Wendy. Next, we have Peter T. from Melbourne Men's Group to share on step 2, please. Welcome, Peter.
My name's Peter, I'm an alcoholic. Good morning. I'm very pleased to be here. I'd like to thank the committee for asking me to speak. I really enjoyed Wendy's talk. This could go really anywhere, so it's going to be really interesting. I'll be glad when it's over because then I'll be able to relax and sit down and enjoy the rest of the convention. But I've been asked to speak on step 2. And Wendy did such a good job speaking on step 1, my job's to speak on step 2. And in the context of the steps, if I understand that step 1 identifies what the problem is, that my problem is lack of power, step 2 talks about where I'm going to find that power. Step 2 in the context of the 12 steps represents what the solution is. And the solution is articulated in the wording of that second step. That I come to believe that a power greater than me could restore me back to sanity. And that represents a solution. Doesn't necessarily happen at that spot, but it's a premise, it's a statement that I need to come to terms with, that I relate to and that I understand and are open to. So, the doctor's opinion said that unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope for his recovery. I need to have an entire psychic change. If my problem was only drinking, then I go to a detox, I would undergo a regime of treatment and I would leave there a recovered person if stopping drinking was the answer. But stopping drinking is not the answer. My problem is not when I'm drinking, but when I'm not drinking. My problem is that my life's unmanageable, not when I'm drinking, but when I'm not drinking it. And if the only problem was stopping drinking, the 200 black words that are on that banner behind me there could be just replaced with one word, and that's stop or don't. And so I've got a mind that somehow at certain times tells me that it's okay for me to drink. And I proved that again and again and again before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was a great stopper, but I was a way better starter. I couldn't stay stopped. And so I need to somehow find something that's going to help me or return me to a way of thinking that doesn't enable my mind to come up with the idea that it's okay for me to drink. Because my mind doesn't see alcohol as a problem, it sees it as a solution to the problem how I feel when I'm sober. My problem is that I've got an allergic reaction to abstinence. I don't do life on life's terms very well, and I look for that ease and comfort which comes from drinking, because that's the answer. So the solution, and he talks about it in the preface of the 12 steps and 12 traditions, he said that AA's 12 steps are a group of principles spiritual in nature when if practiced as a way of life will enable a sufferer, me, to become happily and usefully whole. I was anything but happily and usefully whole when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was not well. I was a person who came here with my very best efforts of doing things, and it landed me in Alcoholics Anonymous. So to be restored back to sanity is to enable me to become once again happily and usefully whole. To have the ability to differentiate right from wrong instead of the inability to differentiate right from wrong. Because that's my problem. Every now and again my mind works on me with my own voice in my own head, working on me that it's okay for me to do what experience should tell me that it's not okay for me to do. And there's a whole chapter that talks about that, and I relate to that chapter, and there's like 4 case studies in there that tells me about what insanity is talking about with respect to the second step. The second step talks about the insanity in the second step is not what I'm doing as a drunken man, but the insanity is that thought process that precedes a relapse back into drinking. It's that rationalisation and justification, that voice that works on me over and over. This time it'll be different. Why don't you not drink this? Why don't you have a bit of this before you start drinking? Don't drink with him, change your brand. It's that voice that works on me. You haven't had a drink for a long time now, maybe it'll be different. And that voice works on me and works on me and works on me until I cave or I don't even think about it and I pick up a drink. And that's the insanity that it's talking about. And that's why I'm powerless over alcohol. I'm powerless over alcohol because I lack the power at certain times to choose whether I drink or not. So the second step, it's a step that segues me towards what that solution is going to look like. It outlines it and it puts it in a really progressive manner, if you like. If the second step represents what the solution is, and the solution is to have a vital spiritual experience or a spiritual awakening as a consequence of the steps, it says it in the 12th step, then that's what the solution is going to do. And in the chapter, in the appendix in the back of the book that got put there after the first edition was written, it tells me what that is. It says that I will undergo a personality change sufficient to recover from alcoholism. I'll be made happily and usefully whole as a consequence of doing the 12 steps. The end of that appendix in the back of the book, he says that willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials to recovery, but these are indispensable. He says, I can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial towards these spiritual principles. So we often say it's a how program, honesty, open-mindedness and willingness. But it's not a how program, it's a who program. 3 times he sends me to the back of the book to read that appendice. It's obviously pretty important. There was quite an emphasis put on understanding what that was and what it wasn't, what it isn't. And so it's not a how, it's a who. And I think the who, the entry point or the suggestion of what the who might look like is indicated in that second step. Talks about a power greater than myself. Everything in Alcoholics Anonymous is preceded with willingness. Willingness comes before everything, and it certainly has in my life. If I'm not willing, I won't become honest. If I'm not honest, I probably won't even consider being open-minded. So willingness, he says, is indispensable. I can't have enough of it. Did I mention my home group's the Melbourne Men's Group, by the way? We meet on a Thursday night. We actually have 2 meetings. We have a book study before the meeting and the main meeting. I just want to put that out there. And I do have a sobriety date, 15 June 91, which I'm pretty proud of. Willingness, honesty and open-mindedness. And I think of the way, how did Ebby work with Bill? Now there's certain literature that can debunk the accuracy of Bill's story. Maybe Bill wrote it the way that he wanted to put it across, maybe not how it happened, but I like the way Bill wrote it. I think Bill wrote it in such a way, he was a good storyteller, and he wrote it in a way that conveyed messages. And I'm thinking about what Ebby did for Bill when he turned up, fresh-skinned and glowing, whatever it was. But what Ebby did to Bill, because Bill had certain vestiges of religious and religion and things that had happened in his past, but Ebby broke him when he said, why don't you choose your own conception of a power greater than yourself? Nothing more was needed of him. And Bill said that it was only a matter of being willing to believe, willingness first. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than him. Nothing more was required. And he said it melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow he had shivered many years. So willingness. It was only a matter of being willing to believe. Now, I think Bill's partner in the whole book project a guy named Henry G. Parkhurst, Hank Parkhurst. I think Hank had a lot to do with the wording of the second step. I think if it was up to Bill, there would have been God right in there, right up front, but there wasn't. And I think Hank it gets introduced in the next step. But I think Hank was the architect of making sure that it read power greater than self. As Ebby had done for Bill. You would think Bill would put that in there, but by the time Bill wrote the steps, I think he was a little bit more God-centred than what he was when he had the visit from Ebby. So, came to believe that a power greater than myself. I think about, Bill said he could go for conceptions like creative intelligence, universal mind, spirit of nature. I went through my book at one point and tried to scribble out as many different terms that I could find that might represent that word God. And he said living creator, power of good, power greater than ourselves, creative intelligence, universal mind, spirit of nature. He used the word God. Supreme being, spirit of the universe, realm of the spirit, great reality, dictator, father, principle, father of light, creator, all-powerful guiding maker, employer, czar of the heavens, presence of power and love, guiding force, great fact and broad highway. You see, the second step, it's really wide. It's not saying to me that I have to believe in anything specific. I think of those terms there and the doorway for me to enter upon this spiritual journey is as wide as it could be by saying power greater than myself. The wording of the step is I tell you, when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I could not do this. Some people can, but I couldn't look at those words in isolation and think that I understood what that meant. It took me going to a step study group, a book study group or whatever before I could then start to understand, because I could put an off-the-wall interpretation of what that means, and an off-the-wall interpretation of the steps might work for some people, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but I couldn't do that. And I couldn't do that with the steps, and I couldn't do that when I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. So my understanding of the steps and application in my own life and experience within that has all come with my time in the textbook of Alcoholics Anonymous, and probably most importantly, trying to take other guys and helping them with that process. But it's worded in a way that edges me into it. It says, I come. And then I come to. It's as if I've been walking through life asleep. I've been walking through life and my eyes have been closed and I'm not even awake. And it doesn't say that I come to know. It doesn't say that I come to have faith in. It doesn't say that I come to fully comprehend and understand or totally define or anything else. It says, I come to, little bit by little bit I start to wake up. And little bit by little bit I start to believe. And I'll tell you how that process happened for me. Alcoholics Anonymous, if you like, it's almost like an adult version of show and tell. And that's what it is. I get to go to a meeting, I walk into a meeting with my best effort of running my life my way, and the results of that program, my program landed me in Alcoholics Anonymous. And what I do is I get to compare what I bring in here with what I see here. I compare what I've got with what I see other people who share from the podium of a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they tell me what it was like as a drinker, what happened to them as a consequence of the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous and a change that happened in their life, and what their life's like today, how they're living as a sober-going concern. And I get to compare what I bring in here with what's on offer here. I get to compare what I bring in here with a simple kit of spiritual tools that every meeting, that every speaker in Alcoholics Anonymous lays out for my inspection. I get to compare my results with their results. And if it doesn't look better being here, I'm out of here. Now, in 34 years, in a month and wherever it is, I've never had to walk out of here because it's always looked more attractive than what I first brought in here. You see, AA is not a program of promotion, it's a program of attraction. It's a results-orientated program. It's an evidence-based program. It's somewhere where I get to see action and I see results. And when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous are you atheist? Are you agnostic? Are you, I don't know. Well, it sounds like you're agnostic. That's almost the definition of an agnostic. When I come in that condition and I hear speaker after speaker after speaker talk about the fact they come to Alcoholics Anonymous, they did certain simple things, they came to believe in a power greater than themselves and did some actions in their lives like this, slowly but surely, I came to, and I started to believe. And I believe that whatever worked for those people in Alcoholics Anonymous could work for me. Whatever power it is that they believe in, maybe I can believe in them. Maybe that simple doorway to Alcoholics Anonymous and that simple first entry point into belief was, well, I can believe in the power of whatever happens in Alcoholics Anonymous. Collectively, there's a group of people here who have more power that seem to have solved their problem and they're going better than I'm going. I'm happy to go with whatever they believe in, the collectiveness of that. Good orderly direction, however you want to phrase it. So it's a process. I start to wake up, I start to be awake, I'm not walking through life asleep anymore. I come to believe, now I'm all right to believe this, that this power greater than myself could, through the application of the 12 steps, enable me to become happily and usefully whole, to restore me back to sanity, to give me the ability to discern right from wrong, to somehow awaken something that's within me that's always been there. Everything that I'm asked to do in Alcoholics Anonymous is, he didn't say that I have to have faith at this point. He said that I only have to believe. Faith is the result of an acquisition of results. When I get results, I then know, and I don't believe anymore, I have faith. And the results are not going to really happen at this point, but I just need to get on the starting point and I need to run. And the only reason that I'm going to run and be motivated to do this is exactly because of what Wendy so accurately spoke about, is that lack of power is my problem. We said it on page 45 that lack of power is my dilemma. I don't have power. I don't have the power when I drink alcohol. Well, then the answer to that is don't drink it, but if that's the only problem, then I don't need AA. We replace that with one word, get rid of all the literature, just go to a detox and recover. My problem is lack of power when I'm not drinking. I have to find this power greater than myself. And the book talks about where we're going to find this power. Well, that's exactly what the book's... It doesn't say kinda. It's kind of what the book's going to be about. It says it's exactly what the book's about. Its main object is to enable me to find a power greater than myself which will solve my problem. My problem isn't when I'm drinking. My problem is when I'm not drinking. This power that I'm looking for, this connection to God, the goal of Alcoholics Anonymous, if you like, I come to understand, and I didn't want to come here to talk about God when I first come to Alcoholics Anonymous, but that's all it's about. Alcoholics Anonymous is a process to try and return me back to the person that I was meant to be, to get me away from who I slid and where I drifted to as a practicing alcoholic and as a person growing up through life who thought that I acquired a lot of things that were useful. Turns out they're not so useful, and I find out that in recovery. And everywhere in the book that it tells me where I need to go and I need to find God is that it doesn't say I need to go down the road to the place that's got the cross on the roof. There's nothing wrong with that. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not putting that down. I don't have to chase a guy around in a white robe or look for a bloke with a beard. I don't have to look there. Every direction that it gives me in the textbook of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I believe this to be true, is it tells me that deep down in every man, woman and child is this idea of God. See, God's a part of my makeup. It's there as much as I have the feeling for a friend. I tell you, I know who God is. I know that voice. I know exactly where that voice is coming from because I've listened to that voice on and off through my life. That voice is called the fun police. That voice is the voice of reason. That's the voice that says this is not a good idea. That's the voice that tells me that I shouldn't be doing this, but once I have a couple of drinks, I don't have to worry about that voice. You see, I understand that the process of Alcoholics Anonymous is not a process of getting rid of, of acquiring anything. It's about a process of removal, of uncovering, discovering and discarding, about getting rid of blockages, about removing the things that block me off. Wilson talked about it. He was blocked off mostly by worldly clamours, those within himself. You see, I come to Alcoholics Anonymous with a lot of baggage that I've got to get rid of. I come to Alcoholics Anonymous with a lot of things that blocks me off from that voice. So I don't have to go to church to find God. God's within me. I was born with it. And I've had this experience. If ever anyone, and I know there's a lot of parents in the room, you want to see the most perfect, innocent, unadulterated, perfect example of the Creator's work, a newborn child, unadulterated, comes in with the manufacturer's fingerprints all over it, the way God would intend it to be. I come in like that, but I drifted a long, long, long way from that spot. So Alcoholics Anonymous and the process of Alcoholics Anonymous and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is a program of trying to return me back to who I was meant to be, back to that person, back to that unselfish, considerate, loving child. We talk about God is love, then that's what I've got to be. I've got to be lovable. I've got to love others. I've got to try and stop thinking about me and think more about other people. You know, it's a funny thing that every greeting card, you know, that talks about love, all talks about love as the shape of a heart. And if my job, if my problem is that I'm a self-centered, self-serving, self-gratifying, selfish individual that I am, I imagine that self-centre is right about here, where my heart is. And my heart's blocked because it's full of that. And if God is love and God is a part of my makeup, what I need to do is I need to remove those things so that God who resides in my heart can re-enter into my heart. God is love. If I'm full of love, I'm full of God. If I'm full of hate, I don't have God. So AA is about trying to return back to that. You know, since 1992, I've been in and out of prisons for Alcoholics Anonymous, working with guys. I work with guys in Pentridge, and I still work with guys every Tuesday at a facility in Melbourne. And I was one time with this guy, and we were in a setting. We were probably talking something around this step, perhaps. This guy was a Greek Orthodox guy. He was sober about 13 years at that time. That's how long he'd been incarcerated for, so he had that enforced sobriety. And I had this captive bunch of guys that we're sitting in that room with, and I love that captive audience in a prison. And he said, we're talking to these guys. And there's a bunch of different guys in that room. There's an Aboriginal kid, there's a Muslim kid, he's a Greek Orthodox, this guy, there's a Catholic, there's a this, there's a that, there's a whatever, there's a gamut of different religions, all walks and shapes of different people with different understandings and beliefs and whatever they were brought up with. And he said something, and I've never forgotten it, because, you know, it's as accurate as the second step as it is to anything else. And he said, listen, you guys, if you've got a problem with God or this whole concept of a power greater than yourself, he said, I want to make it easy for you. He said, think about the last time you were just about to do something, might have landed you in jail this time, and he said, and there was a little voice on your shoulder or in your head that said, this isn't a good idea, and you didn't listen to it. He said, where do you think that voice comes from? So that voice has always been there. God has always been in my life, but I've ignored it. God has always had the best of intentions for me. God wants me to be a useful member of society. God wants me to be a loving father, a good son. God wants me not to be anybody special, but to just be one of his kids. And God wants me to take care of his kids, because that's my job. My job is to look after his kids. Somebody's taking care of me. It's my job now to look after his kids. Whoever his kids are, whether they're in Alcoholics Anonymous, whether they're in my family, or whether they're anywhere else. See, that's my job. My job is to try and be the version of me that I was meant to be. to remove all the stuff and blockages and crap that I picked up along the way, so that I don't operate from that mantra anymore, that I operate from a spiritual way of life, that I know right from wrong, that I can fix mistakes as I go along. And my life today is incredible as a consequence. It's full of love. I've got 2 beautiful daughters at home. I've got a 17-year-old girl that comes with her own set of challenges. But, my job's just to love her. Not to scream at her, but to love her. I'm now all of a sudden my mother's carer almost, and this is my mother who at Christmas time, when I was drinking, I wouldn't even turn up for Christmas because that's part of my holidays and I'm out of here. Now I've got to be current and I've got to be present, I've got to be accountable for. And I can be, because I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I didn't fall for the 3-card trick that Alcoholics Anonymous' goal is to stop drinking. This is not about stopping drinking. There's no literature that we have in any of the literature anywhere that says how to stop drinking. Alcoholics Anonymous is what I need to do after I stop drinking. Stopping drinking is the doorway that gets me into Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't do any of the work that if I don't stop drinking. But stopping drinking is that doorway. The real work is done after I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I understand the consequences of the quicksand that stretches around me in all directions and what I need to do to get out of that. And stopping drinking is not going to solve it. It just makes me sober again. What gets me out of that is to embark upon a spiritual program, to take actions that don't look like they work, to start to come to believe that other people may have a better idea about this than I have about it, and to follow in their footsteps. And if I follow in their footsteps, I might get their results. And I'm so happy I did that. I'm so happy that I suspended my disbelief when I walked through the door, that I was willing enough to believe, that I started to become honest, that I was open-minded to do the actions that I was asked to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. And today I have a wonderful, wonderful life. I wish you the best in this conference, and thanks for asking me to speak.
Thank you, Peter. Next, we have Lisa M. from Fourth Dimension Group to share on step 3, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa, I'm an alcoholic. I'm very nervous. My heart's pumping out of my chest, but I feel very honoured to be here today. Thanks Darren and the committee for asking me to come and share. It's an absolute honour to be at this special event, and it's a really special one. I feel emotional being here. That AA is 80 years old, and there's people who will be on a committee and take the time to put this on. It takes a lot, I know that for a fact. I've been on some committees, and so I'm really grateful. Thank you. As was mentioned, my home group is the Kings Langley Big Book Discussion Group, Fourth Dimension Group, and we meet on Wednesday nights at 7:30. Please come along if you're in the area, and we are not a glum lot, that's for sure. We have a lot of fun at our meeting. My sobriety date's 26th of July 2005, and thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous, good sponsorship, a God of my understanding, and really grateful for that date. I had a drinking dream the other night and I woke up just frazzled, and it amazes me that 19 years on I can still have a drinking dream. I think that's the depths of this illness. That mental twist in the dream was real. I thank you for the speakers who've come before me, set it up really nicely, and I spent many years trying to manage and control my life, and from as early as I can remember, I tried to manage and control my life. I didn't want anyone telling me what to do, and I didn't want any help from anyone. I wanted to make my way in life and just push through, and I had lots of great ideas on how to do that. I'd get, if I only, had better parents, my life would be better. That's my idea of management. They weren't perfect, They were good parents, but in my mind they weren't perfect. Or if I had the perfect boyfriend, or if I earned more money, if I lived in a different part of town, if I could just... There was something within me that could never come out. It was something very stuck within me, and I always felt that as a young kid, and I didn't know what that was. I just never felt that that was the full person I was meant to be. And when I drank, it just did for me what I couldn't do for myself. I just felt such a relief. I felt part of life, like it talks about in the book, you know, and like Bill, I was part of a life at last, and everything was enough, you know, like everything was enough in my life when it was good in the early stages of drinking. But I was powerless over alcohol from the get-go, and it's a way that I used to manage and control my life as well. But I was powerless over what it did, powerless over having the mind and body of an alcoholic. It's been spoken about today, you know, we've all got our stories on how we get here. I didn't know lack of power was my dilemma. I just thought that I'd get to an age, probably around, you know, mid-20s, and I'll be able to pull my socks up and stop drinking. You know, the chaos that the drinking caused in my life was real, and it led me to some really dark places. It led me to places of complete humiliation, degradation. I was ashamed. I would never have done that stuff sober. I was a shy kind of person, but when I drank, I was out there. You know, I'm just thinking like Good Friday mornings used to be like hangover mornings. I was at Oxford Street, you know, many, many years ago on a Thursday night, because I knew I couldn't drink like I wanted to on a Good Friday. So I'd always go out, and Thursday night was always a massive night. And here I am at an AA convention, you know, all these years on. Things have changed, you know. But yeah, I loved to drink, and I loved what it did for me. And coming into AA, I didn't think this was my problem. I thought I had a lot of other problems, because I did try and manage and control my life with men, with food, with sex, with money, with lots of things that I thought were a good solution to my problem. And I found myself on the other side of the world on another solution to my internal problem. And alcohol stopped working, you know, it wasn't doing for me what it used to do, and it started to spook me because I didn't have people getting me home like I did in Australia when I was on the other side of the world. And so that powerlessness really hit home for me, and I ended up living with a girl who was in recovery, and she was very early on, and I thought she was mad as a cut snake. But she would come into my room when I was hungover, and she would say, you know, Lise, maybe you should come to a meeting with me. And I'm like, I'm not as bad as you, you're crazy. I'm not crazy. But I was like, you know, trying to lock the door before she could get in, because I just didn't want to hear it. And I went to a meeting to prove that I was an alcoholic and I wasn't powerless over alcohol. And I found out, you know, obviously I found out I was. But that was a big struggle for me, and I still wanted to manage and control things. And this wasn't part of the deal. This meant I'd have to ask for help, you know, and I'd have to do some things I didn't want to do. And yeah, step one took me a very long time. I'm grateful that finally I did have an experience with it, because without that, I didn't see any need to work the rest of these steps. I didn't understand that these steps would lead me to a power, because I was actually staying sober without them. So it's like, well, why do I need to do these steps? And Peter talked about it beautifully, like it's not about not drinking, right? Because I stopped drinking and my life didn't get any better. I was still trying to manage and control with things that weren't working, and you know, things weren't improving. People were talking about things improving, and I'm like, it's not, nothing's changing. My head's just going mental, and I've got nothing to quiet it down. And I had a sponsor who just said, just keep coming to meetings, just keep putting your bum on a seat. And I was doing that religiously. And you know what? You can't transmit something you haven't got. She hadn't been through the steps. She hadn't had an experience through that, and she wasn't able to show me that, my first sponsor. It's just the way it was. But I'm grateful she gave me a lot of her time and love, because I don't think I'd still be here if it wasn't for her. But through that, I found someone back in Australia. There was 3 women, actually. One of them's here today that I can see. I'm not sure if the other 2 are here, but I went out to a big book workshop, and these women had a message of depth and weight, and they said, you know, if you do this work, you can recover and you can have a good life. And it was something I hadn't heard. I hadn't seen that, you know, like Bill saw in Ebby's eyes. I hadn't seen that. These 3 women had it. And one of them scared the shit out of me, so I wasn't going to ask her for help. But there was one who I did finally approach, and she helped me and started taking me through this book and taking me through the steps, and my life changed dramatically. And like I said, like having that understanding that it's not all the circumstances that make me alcoholic, because I was only 26 when I came in. It was that internal stuff that I had to really get connected with, that inability to stop the fear coming up in me, the paralysing fear that came up in me today. But thank God, God's getting me through it, you know. Just the inability to connect with people, the difficulty, the misery that I lived in, the depression. You know, I wanted to kill myself quite often, and even in early recovery, life's just too hard. And on my own power, I can't get through. So my God became these rooms, that's for sure. You know, I just needed, when I came to these rooms, when I spoke to people one-on-one, they gave me a lot of hope. They gave me a lot of hope that I don't have to live in my head all the time. I don't have to live in misery. Things can get better. But what I heard was, if I go through the steps, life's going to be wonderful and never have a problem ever again. And I don't know why I heard that. I just thought, I'll just do the steps that well that nobody's going to, you know, nothing's going to hurt me. And you know, obviously that's not the case. But, you know, this idea of God, the one I was brought up with wasn't going to work for me in here. And thank God that we don't have to have that God. We can get a new concept of God in here. And if it wasn't for that, I don't think we'd all be here, to be honest. I think it's inspired that yeah, the way things worked out, we can have a God of our understanding, and you don't even have to call it that. But I call it God, and the God I was brought up with wasn't going to work. I was a sinning girl. God didn't want anything to do with me as far as I was concerned. So I found a new God. I found a God through you guys at first. I just gave myself to this program. I was desperate. I didn't want to live that way anymore. And I was scared that if I didn't do this, I'm going to pick up a drink. That really spooked me. And, you know, going through this book, that I got to a place where it's like, if I don't do something, I'm eventually going to pick up, or I'm going to try. I'll probably top myself. It'll be one or the other, or, you know, and I don't want that for myself. I started to see some hope in my life and things getting a little bit better as I was going along. I had a solution. It's good to have a solution, you know. It really is. A solution that's not damaging for once. And not of my mind, you know. It's doing things that I haven't come up with. And that started to, you know, this idea of God started to come into my life, and very small idea that maybe there's something bigger than me. Maybe I don't have all the answers. Maybe I don't know what's right for everybody, including myself. That came little by slowly. I had a sponsor, thank God, you know, for sponsorship, asked me the right questions, helped me get down to the real truth of what's wrong with me. And my problem is me. I'm in my way all the time. I tell myself crazy shit, and it's not true. It's so not true, and it's never based in goodness. A lot of the time it's not based in love and, oh, at least you're going to do good today up there. You know, it's more like you're up against these two and they've got heaps more time on you, and you know, all that stuff, it still goes on, you know, and I've got to pray and ask God to remove it. I don't believe that's from God. I think God, for me, is a loving God and wants what's best for me. And I've got to trust in that. But yeah, the first time I got on my knees and said that third step prayer, nothing amazing, like, you know, dramatic happened. I just got on my knees with my sponsor and said that prayer. And she said, look, it's just, look at your life. How well are you managing, you know? And if you go through these pages, I wrote notes, but I haven't even looked at them because I haven't. And my experience with step 3 was that I had to see, you know, when I first did it, I couldn't see the depths of my unmanageability. I could see the carnage of the drinking and the unmanageability around the drinking, for sure. You know, I was getting into trouble. I was really burning bridges. I was hurting my family. I couldn't stay in any decent relationship. My idea of relationships, you know, I'd meet a guy drunk and then they'd want to catch up the next day for coffee, and I'm like, coffee? No, we've got to meet up in a pub. I couldn't imagine, you know, meeting up with them, and I tried to sober and I just couldn't. I just didn't have the power to get through things like that, you know, and so I thought there was something very, very wrong with me. So I was grateful that, in a way, that I found out that with some work in here I can get better in those areas. And so, yeah, getting on my knees was really a confirmation, a decision to move forward with the rest of this program and to really try and get in touch with that power that is deep down. I believe it's deep down within me. And I was very blocked from that power, and I didn't know how to access it. And I had that little voice that was spoken about. I had that voice when I was drinking. It said to me, "Lise, what are you doing?" It kept asking me that question, and it wasn't strong enough. I just go, like, go away, I'm off. I had to do what I had to do. But I've been given this solution and good guidance through the steps, and my the truth of my unmanageability really came true for me in black and white when I did my first step 4. That's where I really saw what Lisa's life looks like run on self-will. But before that, it was just kind of like, okay, let's go. Yeah, I'll try and do this. I'll do what my sponsor says. That's the right thing to do. But it was only in that inventory that I got to see the truth and how much I had been trying to, my ideas on doing things. If you piss me off, I'm not going to have a conversation with you about it. You're out. I block you. That's it. I didn't have the capability, I didn't have the power to deal with those things, It was just, I was just a runner. That's just how I dealt with things. Or I'll give you the silent treatment, that's going to hurt you, or I had all these ways of getting through life, and it left me very alone and isolated. And, they talk about the problem of alcoholism and addiction as a lack of connection, and I certainly had that. And in doing my third step, it was a decision to move forward. I knew that I couldn't do this on my own, and I needed something else, and I needed more than you, because I could see that even in my drinking, I had partners who were asking me, to stop drinking, and I just couldn't do it for them. And I knew it had to be bigger than you, and it had to be bigger than me. And so then my journey started through this work and through the steps, and that's little by slowly how I got in touch with this power deep down within. And my experience of step 3 today, or along the way, has changed a lot. Around 9.5 years sober, I had a rock bottom emotionally. What I was doing was not working anymore. I was relying on my intellect. I had worked steps so good that you couldn't do it any better than me. I'd crossed all my T's, I'd dotted my I's. I had the way to do this, and I was Teflon, you can't touch me. Anything can happen and I'll be fine. And I come crashing down from that, that's for sure. God gave me an experience where my intellect wasn't working anymore, my knowledge of this work wasn't working anymore, and the right person was put in my path. I actually heard her on a speaker tape talking about step 3. And I reached out to this woman in Iowa, of all places, and she helped me have a new experience with my God. She helped me to understand that, Lise, you can't compartmentalise your life and just use God over here a little bit and God over there a little bit just when you feel like it. It's in all your affairs, and that's been a journey for me. I still want to manage and control over here, and one of the biggest things that happened, along the way in terms of what I think I need for myself and what God thinks. God tells me what I need. I know what I want, but God gives me what I need. And in recovery, I fell in love with someone, and we've been together 14 years, and he's got kids. And at first, it was all very cute. Oh yeah, they've got kids. It's really sweet, and I was sweet. I can be gracious, and I can be kind, and as the book talks about, and I was, because I wanted what I wanted. And once I got what I got, the other side come out, and it wasn't cute anymore, and it was starting to kind of piss me off a bit that he's spending time with his kids, God forbid, and I didn't have that connection with those kids, and that's been so hard for me over the years. It's been a real journey. I've had to write a lot of inventory. God's put this man in my life, and God's put these kids in my life, and I wanted to push them out of that equation. Talk about playing God. And I play God, and I don't even know I'm doing it. And I had a lot of difficulty with one of the kids because At 14 years old, he landed on our doorstep. And 14's a weird age. My son is 14 at the moment, and it's a hard time. And this kid, you know, he landed on our doorstep. His mum had had enough of him. And I had had a hard time with him as it was, seeing him once every 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden, I've have to live with this kid. And I was not happy. I was not happy at all, because I didn't have the power on my own to deal with this. And, oh man, the amount of inventory I wrote, the amount of talking to my sponsor about this situation, you know. I had dark thoughts about him, because you're in my sanctuary. This is my sanctuary, and you have encroached on it, and you need to get out. You know, I need to find a way to get you out. And this is me, 12 years sober, whatever it is. My mind can go there for whatever insecurities or whatever goes on for me inside through inventory. I'm only thinking of me and my needs. I'm not thinking of anybody else in this. And through the years, little by slowly, I've been forced to surrender and see that I'm not in charge of everything, and that he has a right to be in that home as much as me. But I pay the bills, this is my little thing, I pay the bills. His room's dirty. I've got all these little cards that I'll pull out when I'm running rough, or something's pissed me off at work, I'll come home, but this. It comes out sideways, and I don't believe that's, it's not loving, it's not kind, and my point is it's selfish. I'm not concerned about other people, and through the program, thank God, I've got to a place of acceptance around the situation, and I made amends to him. I've made amends a couple of times, but the last time I made amends was, I think, about a year or two ago. And it was the first time that he actually, he's old enough now to really hear me. And I was able to make amends for my behaviour in the home, not welcoming him and all of that. And what I didn't get to see before, working the steps in this program was that, there are other people in this equation, My partner's really happy to have his son live with us. He gets to have a relationship with him that he didn't before because of alcoholism. And my son absolutely adores his brother, absolutely adores him. And he's having an opportunity to have a relationship with him. And I could have stopped all of that. I could have put a stop to all of it, and I tried. But God had bigger plans, and I don't believe that's what God wanted. Obviously not, because it's worked out the way it's worked out, thank God, and I can look him in the eye and I can talk to him today. And sometimes it's really hard to have a conversation even now, but I still try, because I believe that's God's will. So God's will is not always easy. It's often very, very hard for me. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for God and showing up and just trying to do what I think is the right thing. And that's all I try and do in here, because like I said, it's different today. And I've had my struggles at work. I was in all areas, I've had to bring God in and see what's the right thing to do here, and not keep doing things the way I'm doing. And I've learnt the hard way. There's a lot of pain in the household when I was trying to push through and get my way. And I was reading some inventory with my sponsor last weekend, and she said, Lise, do you know that you've said 3 times that you're in charge in your column 3? And I'm like, oh, really? I honestly didn't even realise. I still want to be in charge. I still want to run the show. And it's a daily reprieve, It's a daily reprieve, and I say that third step prayer every day, because I have to be reminded that I'm not in charge. God's already in charge of my life, always has been. It's like, we make this huge decision in step 3. Well, I think it's already been made for me. I'm already been led to this place. I've been led to AA before I get on my knees and say that prayer. I think God's always been there. It's just whether I'm willing to take those actions that are going to keep me connected to that power. And that's what, step 11 really for me is about today. Just trying to stay in touch with that power, because without it, my life's not worth living. It's really a struggle, and very, very difficult to be here in my body in this world without this power. So I think my time's probably nearly up. And I thought that maybe if everyone would like to say the third step prayer together, we could do that as a group. What do you think? Yeah? Okay. You don't have to get on your knees, it's all right. But you can if you want. Oh, bless. God, I offer myself to you to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Amen. Thanks, everyone.
Wow. Thanks, Peter, Wendy, and Lisa, for a great meeting. I don't know whether the noise carried at the start, but apologies if it did. There was lots of people trying to get in to the meeting, so apologies if that disrupted the first couple of minutes of the meeting. I've got lots of announcements, so please bear with me before you run off. First of all, someone's lost their debit card and their first name may be, Rania, R-A-N-I-A. Come and see me, I've got your debit card. There's lots of merchandise out there. If you haven't seen it, baseball caps, black, white baseball caps. We've got t-shirts. Now, lots of people are asking about the t-shirts and saying, what's the stuff on the back? That's where the first meetings opened in Australia. And the dates when they open. Now you know why it's good to go and get the t-shirt. Tea towels. Love a tea towel, love. Got to get a tea towel into ya. This is something else that may happen during the weekend. I may ask whether anybody got sober in the 60s. Now's the time to yell, yes, me. Who got sober in the 60s? Come on, who? Yeah. That may happen during the weekend. There's one up there, great. Bookmarks are for sale. Commemorative little AA medallions, 80th anniversary AA medallions, and they weigh a bomb. I'm sure they're not gold, but they feel like they are actually gold. They're very cool, go check them out. But most importantly, what we have is leather-bound commemorative 80th anniversary big books for sale at the literature desk. It is a rerun of the second Australian edition with Australian stories in the back with a new 80th anniversary forward in the front. So please, there's only 350, most of them are pre-sold. I think there's about 50 left. So if you want one, please don't run them over. Please be patient. And then for this convention, it was approved about 4 years ago to reprint the current green version, but make it into an 80th edition version. So there won't be any more green edition big books anymore. They'll all be these red ones from here on out, from your CSOs, from GSOs, and they are available out the front for the first time today. So there's about, 200 or 300 of them out there for sale as well. That's merchandise. I know lots of you were queued up out the street for Regos. Apologies that it took us a little while. We found that the lanyards were all sort of stuffed in a bit too much, so it took us too long, so please be patient with us. If you haven't got yours yet, go and grab them after the meeting. We have a few dinner dance tickets left. There's about 30 or 40 dinner dance tickets left for the Saturday night dinner dance. So again, back at Rego if you'd like to pick up one of those. There's more, I'm sure there's more. If you're rostered on as a volunteer, there's a green room around the back of the town hall so that you can go and have a look at the big roster. Each day's roster will be on the wall, so you can go around and have a look at that. Lost credit card, big books. We've got people here from other countries, can you believe it? Who's here from out of town as in overseas? Anyone? Hand up, yell really loudly, what's your name? Lovely. New Zealand's in the house. Anyone else from New Zealand in the house? Yes? Come on, louder. Welcome. Anyone from any other countries in the house? I heard there's someone here from Mongolia. Maybe they're not here right now. Yes, there they are. Welcome. 13 years sober, I hear. Congratulations. We're a room full of miracles. The next meeting is back here at 1 p.m. It will be on steps 4 through 7. There'll be a 1 p.m. meeting here, a 3 p.m. meeting here, and then there'll be the official opening ceremony will be back in this room at 7 p.m. If you can get here at 6:45 to find your seats, that'd be really great to help us out. And there are meetings over at the Hilton. So literally go out the front of the town hall, turn left. It's 150 metres on the right. On level 4, I believe, there are AA meetings running continuously during these sessions as well. So people can go over there or come here, go where you like. I think that's me. Can we all, I promise you this is going to get worse. Can we all help Matthew close the meeting with the Serenity Prayer, and we'll see you all back at 1 o'clock.
To a God of your own understanding. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference.